The man sitting beside Karen Whitmore looked exactly like a lawyer, dark suit, leather brief case, perfectly organized folder, a gold watch barely visible beneath his cuff, and when he leaned toward Karen and whispered, "Don't worry, I've got this." She smiled like the courtroom already belonged to her. Then Judge Judy looked across the bench and asked one question. "What's your bar number?" The man's smile disappeared. Karen stopped breathing, and for the first time that morning, the courtroom understood that something was very wrong. Because the man Karen had introduced as her attorney had been speaking with the confidence of someone who believed nobody would ever question him. But Judge Judy had noticed something almost immediately. He had not identified himself as counsel. He had not presented credentials. And when the clerk asked him to confirm his name, he had answered only with a first and last name. That should have been enough to raise suspicion. Judge Judy's question did the rest. Before this story goes any deeper, subscribe if you haven't already, and comment below where you're watching from. Because this courtroom dispute was about to become something far more serious than a simple argument over money. Karen had come to court claiming that a small business owner named Thomas Reed owed her $12,600. According to Karen, Thomas had hired her consulting company to negotiate a commercial lease. She claimed she had spent weeks working on the deal. She said Thomas had received the benefit of her services, and she insisted he had refused to pay after the lease was successfully signed. On paper, it looked like a straightforward contract dispute. Karen had invoices, .mouse, a signed agreement, and a man sitting beside her who appeared ready to defend every word she said. Thomas had brought one folder. Karen had brought three. That visual alone made Karen look prepared. Thomas looked like someone who had been dragged into a fight he never wanted. But Judge Judy was not interested in which side looked more prepared. She was interested in what was actually true. Thomas was 58 and owned a small neighborhood hardware store that his father had started decades earlier. The lease Karen claimed to have negotiated was for a second location. Thomas wanted to expand. Karen had promised she could handle the negotiations. At first, Thomas believed her. She presented herself as experienced, confident, connected. She told him she understood commercial contracts and knew how to protect small business owners. Thomas signed an agreement promising Karen a consulting fee if the lease was completed. The lease was eventually signed. Then Karen sent him a bill for $12,600. Thomas refused to pay. His explanation was simple. He claimed Karen had not completed the work described in the agreement. He said the landlord's attorney had actually handled the negotiations, and he said Karen had attempted to collect a much larger fee after the lease was already finished. Karen disagreed strongly. She claimed Thomas was simply trying to avoid paying someone who had helped him. Then she made the first statement that caught Judge Judy's attention. He thinks because I'm not a huge corporation, he can just ignore a professional agreement. Thomas looked down. Karen smiled. She seemed comfortable, too comfortable. The man beside her leaned forward. "My client fulfilled every material obligation," he said. Judge Judy looked at him. "Are you representing her?" "Yes, Your Honor." The answer came quickly. Karen nodded approvingly. Judge Judy glanced toward the clerk, then back at the man. "What's your bar number?" Silence. The man's expression changed. Karen's smile vanished. He looked at his briefcase, then at Karen, then back at Judge Judy. "I don't have it with me." Judge Judy did not move. That's an unusual answer. The man tried to recover. "I am licensed." "Where?" He named a state. Judge Judy asked another question. "When were you admitted?" He hesitated. Karen suddenly interrupted. "He's been practicing for years." Judge Judy looked at her. "I didn't ask you." Karen stopped. That was the first crack. It was small, but it mattered because Judge Judy was not simply questioning the man's credentials. She was watching Karen's reaction to the question, and Karen had answered too quickly. She had defended him before he had defended himself. That suggested something. The narrator watching the scene could almost feel the pressure shifting. A courtroom has a pulse, and that morning, everyone felt it change. Thomas sat quietly with his folder closed in front of him. He did not look triumphant. He looked confused because he had never seen the man before. Not during the lease negotiations, not during the emails, not during the signing. Thomas had assumed Karen's companion was an attorney because Karen had introduced him that way outside the courtroom. But now Judge Judy was asking questions neither of them appeared prepared to answer. The man cleared his throat. "Your Honor, my licensing information is a technical matter." Judge Judy raised an eyebrow. "No, it's a very simple matter." The man fell silent. Karen leaned toward him. He whispered something back. Judge Judy watched them. She had seen people coordinate stories before. The words were rarely the interesting part. It was what happened between the words. Karen kept touching the edge of her folder. The man kept glancing toward her before answering. Neither appeared comfortable being separated from the other's version of events. Then Judge Judy turned toward Thomas. "Did you ever speak with this man during your contract negotiations?" Thomas shook his head. "No." Karen immediately said, "That's because he was brought in later." Judge Judy looked at her. "Brought in for what?" Karen paused. "To help with the legal side." Judge Judy's eyes narrowed. "What legal side?" Karen didn't answer, and that was the moment the case stopped looking like a $12,600 contract dispute. Because the mysterious man was not listed anywhere in the original agreement. He was not copied on the important emails. His name did not appear in the lease documents. And yet Karen had brought him into court as though his presence alone would make her story more credible. The man reached for his briefcase. Judge Judy noticed. She looked directly at him. "Leave the briefcase closed." His hand stopped. Karen stared at the judge. The courtroom became completely still. Judge Judy had not raised her voice. She had not accused anyone of lying. She had simply noticed that the man seemed more interested in the briefcase than in answering her questions, and whatever was inside it appeared to make Karen nervous. The judge looked at Karen, then at the man beside her. Then at the contract sitting between them. Finally, she asked the question that neither one of them seemed ready for. "If he's your lawyer, why isn't his name anywhere in your case?" Karen opened her mouth. The man looked down, and suddenly the confidence they had walked into court with began to disappear because Judge Judy had found the first contradiction, and she had not even opened the briefcase yet. The man's hand slowly moved away from the briefcase. Judge Judy kept her eyes on him. She had asked a simple question. If he was Karen's lawyer, why wasn't his name anywhere in the case? He finally answered. "I was retained after the original agreement." Judge Judy nodded. "By whom, Miss Whitmore?" "When?" The man hesitated. "Recently." Judge Judy leaned back. "That's not a date." Karen shifted in her chair. The confidence she had shown when she first entered the courtroom was beginning to disappear. The man finally gave a date. Judge Judy looked at the case file. Then she looked at Karen. "That's interesting." Karen frowned. "What's interesting?" "The date you say he was retained." Judge Judy picked up one of the documents. "You filed this lawsuit 3 weeks before that." The man said nothing. Karen looked toward him. For the first time, the two of them seemed to realize they were not moving through the hearing together anymore. They were trying to keep the same story alive from opposite sides. Judge Judy turned toward Thomas. "When did you first learn this man was supposedly representing Karen?" Thomas shook his head. "Today." Karen immediately objected. "That isn't true." Judge Judy looked at her. "You just said he was retained recently." "He was, and Mr. Reed says he never heard of him." "That's because—" Karen stopped. Judge Judy waited. Karen looked down at the papers. The silence stretched. Then she said, "He wasn't involved in the business negotiations." Judge Judy nodded. "Then why is he here?" Karen's answer came quietly. "To protect my interests." Judge Judy's expression did not change. "That's what lawyers are generally for." A few people in the courtroom smiled. Karen didn't. The judge turned toward the man. Let's try this again. Your full name? He gave it. Your firm? He gave a name. Your bar number? Another pause. I don't have it memorized. Judge Judy stared at him. You've been practicing for years and don't know your bar number. I don't carry it around. You don't need to carry it around. You need to know whether you're actually licensed to practice in this jurisdiction. The man looked uncomfortable. Karen leaned toward him. He whispered something. Judge Judy noticed. Don't whisper. The man straightened. I'm sorry. I'm asking you questions. You answer them. Yes, Your Honor. Judge Judy turned to the clerk. Check the name. The clerk began searching the court's records. Karen's fingers tightened around her folder. Thomas looked across the room. He still appeared more confused than pleased. Then the clerk looked up. Your Honor? Judge Judy turned. The clerk said the man's name was not appearing under the state's active attorney records. The courtroom went silent. Karen immediately spoke. He's licensed somewhere else. Judge Judy looked at her. Where? Karen hesitated. The man answered. New Jersey. Judge Judy raised an eyebrow. And you're appearing here as counsel? I was under the impression I could assist. Assist how? He had no answer. Judge Judy turned toward Karen. Did you tell the court he was your attorney? Yes, you knew he wasn't licensed here? Karen's face changed. I thought he could represent me. Judge Judy nodded slowly. That wasn't my question. Karen looked down. The first major contradiction had been exposed, but Judge Judy was not finished because the missing bar number was only the beginning. She opened the original case file. Inside was a copy of Karen's contract with Thomas. The agreement had 6 pages. Judge Judy looked through them carefully. Then she stopped. Mr. Reed, yes, Your Honor? Did you sign this? Yes. Did Ms. Whitmore sign this? Yes. Judge Judy turned toward Karen. Is this the agreement you're suing under? Yes. Then, why does the payment clause say something different from what you're claiming today? Karen froze. The man beside her leaned forward. Judge Judy held up the document. The contract stated that Karen's fee would be paid only if she personally completed specific negotiation services. Karen had testified that she had done exactly that, but Thomas had brought emails showing the landlord's attorney had handled nearly every negotiation. Karen claimed she had simply supervised the process. That was not what the contract said. Judge Judy turned toward the mysterious lawyer. Did you review this contract before coming here? Yes. Then you knew what it said. Yes. Did you advise Miss Whitmore that her claim depended on proving she performed those services? The man hesitated. Yes. Judge Judy looked at Karen. Did you perform them? Yes. Show me. Karen opened her folder. She pulled out several emails. Here. Judge Judy read them. They showed Karen forwarding messages between Thomas and the landlord, but none showed Karen actually negotiating the terms. Thomas leaned forward. Your Honor, those emails were after the landlord's attorney had already agreed to everything. Karen shook her head. No. Judge Judy looked at Thomas. Do you have the earlier correspondence? Yes. Thomas opened his folder. He produced a printed email chain. Judge Judy read it, then another, then another. Her expression became increasingly serious. The landlord's attorney had negotiated the rent. The landlord's attorney had negotiated the security deposit. The landlord's attorney had negotiated the renewal clause. And the landlord's attorney had drafted the final lease. Karen's contribution appeared to be limited to forwarding messages. Judge Judy looked at Karen. You want $12,600 for forwarding emails. Karen became defensive. I managed the entire process. Judge Judy nodded. Then where is the management agreement? Karen pointed to the original contract. It's right there. Judge Judy shook her head. No, that's the consulting agreement. She looked directly at Karen. Where is the document that says you were entitled to $12,600 for management? Karen said nothing. The man beside her finally spoke. Your Honor, there were verbal modifications. Judge Judy turned toward him. Between whom? Between Miss Whitmore and Mr. Reed. Thomas immediately shook his head. That never happened. Judge Judy looked at Karen. Did it? Karen hesitated, then nodded. Yes. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed. When? Karen gave a date. Judge Judy looked at Thomas. Were you in the same room? Yes. Was anyone else present? Thomas said no. Judge Judy turned back to Karen. Where? Karen gave an address. Judge Judy looked down at the file. That address was the landlord's office. Thomas shook his head. I've never met her there. Karen stared at him. The man beside her whispered again. Judge Judy immediately stopped him. No more whispering. Then she asked Karen something unexpected. Who told you to say that address? Karen's eyes widened. I don't understand. Judge Judy pointed toward the man beside her. You looked at him before answering. The man sat completely still. Karen looked nervous. Judge Judy continued. I want to know whether you're giving me your memory or his. The courtroom fell silent. Karen looked at the man. The man looked at Karen. And in that moment, Judge Judy had uncovered something neither one of them had intended to reveal. They weren't simply sharing a legal strategy. They appeared to be sharing answers. But Judge Judy had one more document, a document that could prove whether this man had really been hired recently or whether Karen had known him long before the lawsuit was filed. She reached into the case file. Karen saw the paper. Her face went pale because at the top of the page was a date, and it was several months earlier than the date Karen had just given. Karen stared at the document in Judge Judy's hand. The date at the top was impossible to ignore. It was 4 months before the date Karen had claimed she hired the man sitting beside her. 4 months. That single detail changed the meaning of everything that had happened in the courtroom. Judge Judy looked at Karen. You said you hired him recently. Karen nodded slowly. Yes. Then why does this document show that he was communicating with you 4 months earlier? Karen looked toward the man. He did not look back. The silence became uncomfortable. Finally, Karen said, that was unrelated. Judge Judy raised an eyebrow. Unrelated to what? The business. What business? Karen paused. My business. Judge Judy held up the document. This is an email from you to him discussing Mr. Reed's lease. Karen said nothing. Thomas looked stunned. You told me you didn't know him, he said. Karen turned toward him. I never said I didn't know him. Thomas shook his head. You told me he was your lawyer today. Judge Judy looked at Karen. And now you're telling me he was involved months earlier. Karen's expression hardened. He was helping me with some things. Judge Judy nodded. Then why did you tell this court you hired him recently? Karen did not answer. The man finally spoke. Your Honor, there may have been some confusion about the exact date. Judge Judy turned toward him. No, there isn't. She placed the document on the bench. The date is printed on the email. The man went quiet, Judge Judy continued. You were discussing the exact lease that is the subject of this lawsuit. Yes. So you were involved before the lawsuit was filed? Yes. And before Ms. Whitmore says she hired you? He hesitated. Yes. Judge Judy leaned back. Now the question was no longer whether he was licensed. The question was why Karen had brought him into court and presented him as something he apparently was not. Judge Judy looked toward the clerk. Is he licensed in this state? The clerk checked again. No, Your Honor. Judge Judy nodded. Then she looked at the man. Were you aware that you could not represent someone in this courtroom without being admitted to practice here? He hesitated. I was aware there were rules. Judge Judy's expression changed. There are rules for a reason. Karen immediately tried to interrupt. He wasn't actually representing me. Judge Judy looked at her. You introduced him as your attorney. Karen fell silent. You allowed him to speak on your behalf. Silence. You relied on him to answer legal questions. Karen looked down. Judge Judy continued. That sounds very much like representation. The man shifted in his chair. Then Judge Judy asked something that neither Karen nor the man expected. Did you prepare this lawsuit? The man answered carefully. I assisted with the paperwork. Did you write the complaint? He hesitated. Yes. Thomas looked toward the judge. The room became still. Judge Judy looked at Karen. So the person who drafted your lawsuit is not admitted to practice here. Karen swallowed. He's experienced. That wasn't my question. Karen said nothing. Judge Judy picked up the complaint. She examined the signature page. Then she noticed something. The signature line contained Karen's name, but beneath it was another notation. Initials. The same initials appeared on several documents. Judge Judy looked at the man. Are those your initials? He hesitated. Yes. Why are they on a document you didn't officially prepare as counsel? He didn't answer. Karen reached for the paperwork. Judge Judy pulled it slightly away. Leave it. Karen stopped. The courtroom was now completely focused on the two people sitting at the plaintiff's table. Their strategy had been obvious at the beginning. Karen would make the claim. The supposed lawyer would make the claim sound legitimate. Thomas would feel overwhelmed. The judge would accept the paperwork. But that plan had depended on one assumption, that nobody would look closely. Judge Judy looked at the original agreement again, then at the complaint, then at the emails. She saw something else. The language in the lawsuit repeated several phrases from an email the man had sent Karen months earlier. Not similar language, the same unusual wording. That meant the lawsuit had been built from their earlier communications. The man had clearly been involved, long before Karen admitted it. Judge Judy looked at him. Why did you tell the court you were retained after the lawsuit was filed? The man stared at the floor. Karen whispered, Don't answer that. Judge Judy heard her. Excuse me? Karen looked up. I said nothing. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed. You just told him not to answer. Karen froze. The man closed his mouth. Judge Judy turned toward the clerk. Please make a note of that. Karen's attorney, if he could still be called that, looked increasingly uncomfortable. Judge Judy then turned toward Thomas. Mr. Reed, did you ever receive a letter from this man? Thomas searched through his folder. Yes. He pulled out an envelope. I thought it was from Karen's company. Judge Judy opened the copy. The letter was addressed to Thomas. It demanded payment of $12,600. At the bottom was the man's name. Not as Karen's attorney, as a representative of Karen's consulting company. Judge Judy looked at Karen. You said he wasn't involved until recently. Karen said nothing. Judge Judy looked at the man. You said you were hired recently. He said nothing. Then she looked at both of them. And yet you were corresponding with the defendant months before this case was filed. The room was silent. The contradiction was no longer subtle. It was documented, but Judge Judy had not yet reached the most damaging piece. She turned another page. It was a payment record. Karen had claimed she hired the man recently. The record showed a payment to him months earlier. The description read, Legal preparation. Read matter. Karen stared at it. The man leaned toward her. She whispered something. Judge Judy interrupted. No. Both of them looked up. Whatever you're about to say it where everyone can hear it. Karen's face tightened. Judge Judy placed the payment record beside the original contract. Then she looked directly at the man. Were you paid to prepare this case before it was filed? He hesitated, then quietly. Yes. Karen closed her eyes. That admission changed everything because now the courtroom had a clear timeline. The man had been involved months earlier. He had been paid to work on the Reed matter. He had helped prepare the lawsuit. He had appeared in court as Karen's lawyer. And he was not licensed to practice in the state. But Judge Judy still had one final question. She looked at Karen. Why did you lie about when he was hired? Karen stared back. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then she gave an answer that stunned everyone. I didn't think it mattered. Judge Judy nodded slowly. That may be the first honest thing you've said today. Karen looked down. The man beside her suddenly seemed less confident. But Judge Judy wasn't finished. Because the payment record had revealed something else. The money Karen paid him was not described as consulting assistance. It was specifically connected to the legal preparation of this case. And that raised a much bigger question. Was Karen simply trying to win a civil dispute, or had the two of them deliberately created the appearance of legal representation to make a weak claim look stronger? Judge Judy reached for the final document. It was an email Karen had sent to the man shortly before the hearing. She read the subject line. Then she looked up. Karen saw her expression. And for the first time that morning, Karen looked genuinely afraid, because the email contained a sentence that could explain exactly why she had brought this particular man into court. And it was only 7 words long. Judge Judy held the email in her hand. Karen stared at the screen. The man beside her had stopped moving entirely. The subject line was simple. Make him believe we have a case. Judge Judy looked up. Who wrote this? Karen said nothing. The judge looked at the man. He said nothing too. That silence told its own story. Judge Judy read the email again. It had been sent 3 days before the lawsuit was filed. Karen had written to the man asking him to prepare the documents and make the claim look airtight. Thomas looked stunned. He turned toward Karen. You knew the landlord's attorney did the negotiations. Karen didn't respond. Judge Judy continued reading. The email discussed the $12,600 demand. It also contained a sentence explaining why Karen wanted the man present in court. She wanted Thomas to believe she had professional legal backing. The man finally spoke. Your Honor, I can explain. Judge Judy looked at him. Please do. He took a breath. He claimed Karen had asked him for general assistance. He said he had helped organize documents. He insisted he had never intended to mislead the court. Judge Judy nodded. Then why did you allow Miss Whitmore to introduce you as her lawyer? He hesitated. I didn't correct her. Judge Judy's eyebrows rose. That is not the same as correcting her. Karen suddenly spoke. I was under pressure. Judge Judy looked at her. Pressure doesn't change what you told the court. Karen's eyes moved toward the floor. The courtroom had reached the point where neither person could safely explain anything without creating another contradiction. Judge Judy returned to the original dispute. She wanted to know whether Karen was actually owed the $12,600. The answer was becoming obvious. The contract required Karen to perform specific negotiation services. The emails showed that the landlord's attorney had performed those negotiations. Karen had forwarded messages. She had followed up. She had communicated with Thomas. But the central service described in the contract had not been performed by her. And now the supposed lawyer had helped construct a lawsuit around a claim that the evidence did not support. Judge Judy looked at Karen. You knew this. Karen shook her head. I believed I had earned the money. That isn't what I asked. Karen said nothing. Judge Judy turned toward the man. Did you tell her she had a strong claim? He hesitated. Yes. After reviewing the contract? Yes. After reviewing the emails? Yes. Judge Judy nodded. Then you gave her bad advice. The man looked uncomfortable. Judge Judy wasn't finished. And then you came into court and presented yourself as counsel when you were not admitted here. He said nothing. Karen looked at him. For the first time, there was no confidence in her expression. There was disappointment, perhaps even anger, because the person she had brought to court to make her look stronger had become one of the biggest reasons her case was collapsing. Judge Judy returned to the 7-word sentence. Make him believe we have a case. She looked directly at Karen. Is that what you wanted? Karen finally answered. I wanted him to take me seriously. Judge Judy nodded. That I believe. Then she paused. But wanting someone to take you seriously is not a legal argument. Thomas looked down at his folder. The entire hearing had begun with him being accused of refusing to honor an agreement. Now the evidence suggested something very different. Karen had filed a claim based on services she could not prove she performed. Then she had brought someone into court who appeared to be an attorney but was not licensed in that jurisdiction. And the two had coordinated their story before the hearing. Judge Judy made her ruling on the financial claim. Karen's demand for $12,600 was denied. The contract did not support the amount she claimed. The evidence did not establish that she had completed the required services. And her credibility had been severely damaged by the contradictions in her testimony. But Judge Judy was not finished with the courtroom. She looked at the man. "You are not licensed to practice here." "Yes, Your Honor." "You participated in preparing this case." "Yes." "You accepted payment for that work." "Yes." "And you allowed yourself to be presented as counsel." He lowered his head. "Yes." Judge Judy's voice became firm. "That is a separate matter." The clerk was instructed to preserve the relevant documents and recordings for review. The man suddenly looked much less like the confident attorney who had entered the room that morning. Karen sat beside him, staring straight ahead. Neither spoke. Judge Judy then turned toward Thomas. "You did one thing very well." Thomas looked up. "You brought your original documents." She held up the contract. "Never underestimate what happens when someone has the original paperwork." Thomas nodded. The courtroom began to settle, but Karen wasn't finished. She stood slowly. "Your Honor, may I say something?" Judge Judy nodded. Karen looked toward Thomas. "I shouldn't have handled it this way." Thomas said nothing. Karen continued. "I was angry that he wouldn't pay me." Judge Judy watched her carefully. Karen admitted she had convinced herself that because she had spent time on the lease, she deserved the money. She admitted she had hired the man to help make the claim appear stronger. And she admitted she knew he was not licensed in the state. The courtroom became silent again. The confession was not dramatic. It was almost quiet. But it changed the final meaning of the case. Karen had not simply misunderstood the contract. She had tried to make a weak claim look stronger by surrounding it with the appearance of legal authority. And Judge Judy had exposed the entire strategy with one question. "What's your bar number?" 7 words. That's all it took. Not a long investigation, not a dramatic accusation, just a question that forced the man to establish something he should have been able to answer immediately. And once he couldn't, the rest of the story began unraveling. The lesson was simple. A suit doesn't make someone a lawyer. A briefcase doesn't make someone a lawyer. Confidence doesn't make someone a lawyer. And standing beside someone in court doesn't make a claim legitimate. Evidence does. Judge Judy looked at Karen one final time. "You brought someone here because you thought his presence would make your story stronger." She paused. It did the opposite. Karen lowered her head. The man beside her said nothing. Thomas quietly gathered his documents. And as the courtroom doors opened, the case that had started with a $12,600 demand ended with something much more valuable. A reminder that when a story depends on appearances, one simple question can expose everything underneath. If you enjoyed this courtroom story, subscribe for more cases where confidence meets evidence, and comment below. Asterisk, would you have noticed the fake lawyer before Judge Judy asked the bar number question? Asterisk, Karen thought admitting she had made a mistake would finally end the hearing. It didn't. Judge Judy still had one issue to resolve. She looked at the man beside Karen. "Why did you come here?" He looked confused. "To assist my client." Judge Judy shook her head. "She isn't your client in this courtroom." The man swallowed. Karen looked at him. Neither spoke. Judge Judy continued. "You knew you weren't admitted to practice here. You knew Miss Whitmore was introducing you as her attorney. You knew the lawsuit had been prepared before you supposedly became involved." The man lowered his eyes. "And you still came?" "Yes." "Why?" "This time," he answered honestly, "because she asked me to." Judge Judy nodded. "That is an explanation. It is not an excuse." The courtroom became quiet again. Karen looked toward Thomas. "I thought if he was there, you'd take the claim seriously." Thomas shook his head. "I would have taken you seriously if the documents supported you." That sentence landed harder than anything else that morning, because it exposed the real mistake Karen had made. She had focused on looking credible instead of being credible. She had assumed a professional-looking man could give her claim authority. She had assumed a confident presentation could overcome missing evidence, and she had assumed Thomas would be intimidated. Judge Judy looked at the original contract one last time. The agreement speaks for itself. She ruled that Karen was not entitled to the $12,600. The supporting evidence did not establish that she had performed the services required under the contract. The court also preserved the documents concerning the man's unauthorized appearance for appropriate review. Karen nodded silently. The man beside her closed his briefcase. But before he could stand, Judge Judy asked one final question. "Do you understand why I asked for your bar number?" He nodded. "Yes, good." She looked toward Karen. "And do you understand why your entire case changed after he couldn't answer?" Karen nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." Judge Judy's final words were simple. "Because credibility starts with the truth, not the costume." Karen looked down. The man said nothing. Thomas gathered his papers and slowly walked away from the table. There was no celebration, no applause, just the quiet relief of someone who had been accused of owing thousands of dollars and had finally been heard. Outside the courtroom, Thomas later said, "The strangest part wasn't seeing Karen's claim dismissed. It was realizing how close he had come to doubting himself. Karen had spoken so confidently. Her documents looked so official, and the man beside her looked so convincing. For a moment, Thomas wondered whether he had misunderstood the agreement. Then Judge Judy asked one question that had nothing to do with the amount of money, nothing to do with the lease, nothing to do with the arguments, just a simple question about whether the man was actually qualified to stand there as a lawyer. That question opened the door. Behind it was the truth about the lawsuit. Karen had known the man before she admitted it. He had helped prepare the case. She had paid him before the lawsuit was filed. He was not licensed in that courtroom, and she had allowed everyone to believe he was. The entire strategy had depended on appearance, and appearance lasted only until someone asked for proof. That is why this courtroom moment became so memorable. The case wasn't defeated by a dramatic speech. It wasn't defeated by shouting. It wasn't defeated by some surprise witness walking through the door. It was defeated by a question so ordinary that Karen probably never imagined it would matter. "What's your bar number?" And once the answer didn't come, everything else had to be examined again: the contract, the emails, the payments, the lawsuit, the timeline, and the relationship between Karen and the man she had brought to court. By the end, the courtroom had learned something important. A polished folder doesn't make a weak claim strong. A suit doesn't make someone an attorney. And confidence doesn't make testimony true. Evidence does. Karen entered the courtroom believing she had brought the one person who could make everyone believe her. Instead, she brought the person who helped Judge Judy discover that the story wasn't what it appeared to be. And sometimes that's all it takes: one question, one pause, one answer that doesn't exist. And suddenly the entire story falls apart. If you enjoyed this courtroom story, subscribe for more dramatic courtroom cases. And comment below. Asterisk, would you have trusted the lawyer when he first walked into the courtroom? The courtroom doors had already begun to close when Karen stopped. She turned around. For a moment, it looked like she might say something else. Instead, she looked at the man she had brought with her. He was no longer carrying himself like a confident attorney. His briefcase was closed. His papers were stacked unevenly. And the confidence that had filled the room earlier was gone. Karen quietly asked, "Why didn't you tell me she would ask that?" He looked at her. "Because I didn't think she'd ask." Karen stared at him. Neither of them realized that Thomas was still close enough to hear. He looked at them and shook his head. "That was your problem." Karen turned. Thomas continued, "You were worried about what she would ask. You should have been worried about whether the answers were true." Karen didn't respond. Then she walked away. The next morning, the story had already become the subject of conversation around the courthouse. Not because the amount was enormous, not because the hearing had been especially long, but because the entire case had unraveled from one question. "What's your bar number?" It sounded almost too simple. Yet that question exposed the first contradiction. The supposed attorney couldn't provide a bar number. The clerk couldn't verify an active license. Karen admitted she had known him months earlier. The payment records showed she had paid him before filing the case, and the emails showed that he had helped prepare the lawsuit. The original dispute had been about $12,600. By the end, the money was almost secondary. The real issue was credibility. Karen had wanted the courtroom to see a professional. Instead, Judge Judy saw a question mark. She wanted Thomas to see an attorney. Instead, he saw someone whose credentials could not be confirmed. She wanted the court to see a strong legal claim. Instead, the documents revealed a much weaker one. And perhaps the biggest lesson was the simplest. A person can prepare for every question they expect, but they cannot prepare for every question that matters. Karen had rehearsed her story. She had organized her folders. She had chosen someone who looked convincing. But she had overlooked the one thing that cannot be manufactured. Proof. The original contract had not changed. The emails had not changed. The payment records had not changed. And the courtroom records had not changed. Only Karen's explanation kept changing. First, the man was her lawyer. Then he had only been recently hired. Then he had been helping earlier. Then he wasn't really representing her. Then she admitted she knew he wasn't licensed locally. Each explanation was supposed to solve the previous problem. Instead, each one created another. Judge Judy had not needed to accuse her of anything. She simply kept asking questions. And every answer revealed another piece. That's why the final moment was so powerful. Karen had believed the man beside her would make her look stronger. But when Judge Judy asked one basic question, his presence became the weakest part of her case. The hearing ended with Thomas owing Karen nothing. Karen's claim was dismissed. And the questionable legal appearance was left for the appropriate authorities to review. But Thomas remembered something else. Before leaving, Judge Judy had told him to keep his original documents. He did. He placed the contract back into the same folder he had brought into court. Then he walked out. No victory speech, no celebration, just relief, because sometimes justice doesn't look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like a judge turning one page, asking one question, and refusing to accept an answer that doesn't make sense. And that was exactly what happened that morning. Karen arrived believing appearances would carry her through. She left knowing that appearances are only useful until someone checks them. The man she brought as a lawyer had looked convincing. The case had looked convincing. Her confidence had looked convincing. But none of those things survived scrutiny. The truth did, and that was the part Karen had never prepared for. If this story reminded you that confidence is not the same thing as credibility, subscribe for more courtroom stories where one small question can change everything. And comment below. Asterisk, what would you have asked Karen if you were sitting on that bench?